Hi there, my name is Tana. Welcome to my channel, Boardroom to Bounce House. I am a busy working mom to two little ones. I work full-time outside of the home in a corporate job, as well as manage YouTube and a few other side hustles. On my channel, I try to focus on pregnancy, postpartum, and motherhood as a working mom. And in today's video, I would like to share my birth story. Not seen my previous birth story, I will link it below, but in summary, I had a very high risk pregnancy with my first baby. I had originally been diagnosed with a molar pregnancy very early in the pregnancy, and I was told that I would need to abort the pregnancy. However, I just had a strong feeling that the doctors were wrong. I got a second opinion, and it turned out that I didn't have a molar pregnancy, so thank God for that. But I did go on to have kind of a complicated pregnancy because I had what's called vasa previa. And vasa previa is a pretty rare condition that only happens in about 1 in every 2,500 pregnancies, give or take. The reason that it's high risk is basically it can be fatal for the baby if it's not managed properly. If it's not found, there is a very, very high chance that it can be fatal for the baby, and obviously very stressful for mom. So that was a whole thing, and if you're interested in hearing more about that, you can click the link below. So just keep that in mind as I share this story, because this story is basically the exact opposite of my first birth. With the first birth, it was high risk. I was on bed rest at the end. I had a planned C-section, and I really didn't have any choices that I was able to make for myself. Everything was made for me based on the treatment plan for vasa previa, and they are 20 months apart to the day. So it was pretty soon after. When I got pregnant with my second baby, I knew that I wanted this pregnancy to be completely different than my first. And even down to the fact that I didn't want to know what gender he was, and I just wanted to find out at birth. So I had a very different pregnancy the second time around, and labor was very different as well, since I actually experienced labor this time. I ended up going into labor at 38 weeks and 4 days, and I ended up having a very positive birth experience. I had the same OBGYN, and I gave birth at the exact same hospital that I had my older baby, but the experience was the complete opposite. I went into labor around 2:30 in the morning. I woke up and was having really, really intense contractions. And up until this point, I really hadn't experienced any Braxton Hicks at all. So at first I thought okay, maybe I'm just experiencing, Braxton Hicks. Keep in mind, I didn't make it this far in my pregnancy with my first, so I had never been 38 weeks pregnant before. And I just thought, okay, maybe I'm, getting into that phase where I might be starting to have these random contractions. But after about an hour, I pretty much knew that these were not random because they were consistent and they were really painful. I actually decided to get into all fours on the bed, and I was just kind of in this fetal position trying to not wake up my husband, because if it was labor, I wanted him to just sleep as long as possible, knowing that we might be at the hospital for, a long time. I was just trying to kind of fight through the pain and deal with it. And maybe after about an hour or so, I decided that I was gonna get into the bathtub. Went to the bathtub and I drew myself a hot bath, and I ended up sitting in the bathtub for, I don't know, probably about a half hour or so. The water was getting cold and it just wasn't really sticking around. And I didn't wanna refill my bathtub again, but in retrospect, I wish that I had had a better bath stopper so that I could have stayed in the bath longer, because the bath was actually the place that was helping me the most with my contractions. And at this point I had been making, I think, enough noise that my husband woke up. He woke up probably around 4 or so. It was actually really funny because I was in the bathtub and he decided that he was gonna cut his hair at 4 in the morning while I was having contractions, which, I mean, I guess he needed to do something, and he wanted to make sure he got a haircut in before we went to the hospital and took pictures with our newborn. It was kind of comical when I think about it now. So I got out of the bathtub, and at the time I was in grad school. I hadn't filled out all my paperwork to let them know that I was having a baby and I might be missing classes for a week. So at 4 in the morning, I was trying to get on my computer and print this paperwork and scan it and get it back over to school, which was kind of funny. But I was just trying to do anything I could to sort of preoccupy my mind. I called my mom around 5. I think I'm in labor. Here's what's going on. And at this point, maybe my water had broken, but I wasn't quite sure because it wasn't it wasn't like a gushing. Like I know in the movies they make it seem like, oh, your water broke, there's gushing water. I'm pretty sure for like 90% of women that does not happen. It's more like a trickle. And part of that is because when your waters break, the baby can actually be sitting in a position that prevents the water from coming out. So if the baby moves or you move a lot, that could help the water come out more. So I wasn't quite sure if my water had broken or not, but I was pretty sure that either it had or it was going too soon. I was having contractions on the phone with her and she was like, no, you are in labor, 100%. I can just tell from your voice. I can tell from everything you are in labor. I decided to call my doula. I hired a doula this time around. I hired a doula team. It was a team of 5 or 6 women and I wasn't sure like who was gonna be at my birth, but I had met almost all of them in advance. So I called my doula, I told her what was going on. I had been using an app on my phone to try to record the contractions. I was pretty good about hitting the button when like the contraction would start, but I kept forgetting to hit it when the contraction would end. So my timing was not exactly perfect. It was a little bit off, but I did my best. And I also was telling her that I would have a contraction where one felt really, really productive, and then the next contraction would feel totally not productive. It's hard to describe, but basically I would have a contraction that felt good, like I was making progress maybe, and then I would have one that was like shorter and kind of awkward and not the same as the last one. And when I was describing that to her, she said, you need to go to your stairs and go, oh, I want you to walk up and down your stairs and sort of do like lunges, because she was guessing that baby was in a position where that was sort of preventing all the contractions from repeatedly being productive. So I ended up doing that. I was up and down on my stairs doing these weird lunges and kind of like walking up and down. It was kind of comical when I think about it now, but I really wanted to just labor at home as long as possible. So the issue with wanting to labor as long as possible at home was 2 things. One, I had previously had a high risk pregnancy that was a C-section delivery. And 2, I had group B strep. I found out that I had group B strep like I think a week before I went into labor. And I was kind of stressing about this because I knew that it meant that I was gonna have to have an IV, and my goal, my birth plan for this birth was to go completely natural, labor at home as long as possible, and then get to the hospital and push. I basically didn't want to be on an IV and I wanted as minimal medical intervention as possible. And the reason was because I had done some research while pregnant and I had read several books, including the Bradley method, and I really wanted to try to have the baby naturally to avoid having another C-section. My doctor gave me the option to have a repeat C-section that would have been scheduled, and we talked about that consistently throughout my pregnancy, but because I really wanted to experience labor and I really did not want to have a C-section again, you know, he said, as long as everything looks good, you do not have to have a C-section. And he was very, very supportive in me having a VBAC or a vaginal birth after cesarean. Or sometimes it's called a TOLAC because it's trial of labor after cesarean. That's usually what they'll deem it if you try but like end up still having to have a C-section, or some hospitals just call it TOLAC now. Anyway, he was very supportive of doing TOLAC and hopefully a VBAC, and I had talked to him about the group B strep and told him what my concerns are. One of the things that I had read, I follow evidence-based birth. If you're pregnant right now and you don't follow evidence-based birth, definitely would recommend following them here on YouTube and on other social medias, because they put out a lot of really great information and it is evidence-based. And one of the things I kept reading over and over again was that when you are laboring at home and you're comfortable, your body is in a place where it really can progress more naturally. And when you get to the hospital and you're kind of in a foreign place and you're under these bright lights, like it can put your body in a little bit of a stressful situation where the labor stops progressing as quickly. And my goal was to have labor continue to progress. I didn't want anything to intervene. So that was a big reason of why I wanted to labor at home as long as possible. But with the VBAC and with the group B strep, my doctor pretty much said you need to come to the hospital when your contractions are 5 minutes apart. So around 6 a.m. I called my doctor, left a message. He called me back maybe like 15 minutes later. I kind of gave him the play-by-play, told him how things had been progressing and that I had spoken with my doula. And I had a couple of contractions while I was on the phone with my doctor, and he was like, yeah, you need to come to the hospital. Like if they're 5 minutes apart, you need to come. And he said to me, but I just want to let you know that when you get here, you might only be 1 or 2 centimeters dilated, and I don't want you to be disappointed. So just wrap your mind around that, because it could be a long day ahead of us. I think especially because I had never experienced labor before at this point, he was just trying to remind me that sometimes these things take time. We needed to make sure that my toddler, you know, had somewhere to be since we were going to be heading to the hospital, but no one was really going to be able to make it here before daycare opened. So I decided to just stick it out until 7 a.m. because daycare was on the way to the hospital. And we got my son up, got him to daycare. We were the first ones there. We were there before 7 o'clock. I remember my husband said they opened the door and they were like, wow, you're here early. And he was like, on our way to the hospital, gotta go. While my husband was dropping my son off at daycare, I was doing laps around the car. Like I was like running around the car, and it was winter. So I had like this big coat on and this huge stomach, and I was like kind of lunging and stretching. And everyone that walked by on the sidewalk was kind of looking at me like, what is wrong with this woman? Because she's running around the car. But the reason I was doing that was because the car was the worst place to be during labor. The contractions that I felt in the car were so strong. It was so uncomfortable. Like being crunched up sitting was just the worst position for me. All I wanted to do was elongate my body and stand up. Then I got back in the car and continued to experience the pain of labor in the car. I remember calling my mom because I called to tell her she should get on a plane to come. Her grandchild was about to be born, and she was actually with my grandmother, who was listening to me in pain and saying like, you know, you got this, you can do it. Our grandma's had 5 kids, so definitely was appreciative of her support. We ended up getting to the hospital around 8 o'clock. Once I got fully checked in, they put me in a triage room. I remember I went to the bathroom and I had another contraction in the bathroom, and it was like so intense, and I came out and was like, I really think this baby is coming. And they kept saying like, oh, well, we'll check, like kind of preparing me to tell me that I was maybe like 1 or 2 centimeters. And you know, they even had said like, you're probably gonna be in this room for a while, so like make yourself comfortable. This is before they like checked me and all that. So then when they actually went to see how far I was dilated, the nurse was like shocked. She looked at me and she was like, oh my gosh, you're 5 centimeters and you're 90% effaced. And I was like, oh my God, that is awesome. Like I was so excited when she told me that, because like my doctor had said it, and then the nurses had said it when I got there, and I was like fully thinking I was gonna maybe be sitting in this triage room for like 12 hours. And I've had so many friends who have gone into labor and they've been in labor for like 36 hours or 72 hours, like all this crazy stuff. A lot of them, you know, ended up having C-sections or whatnot. And that was kind of my biggest fear, was like not going into labor on my own and then ending up still in the OR. They said, okay, we're going into a labor and delivery room right now, because doing the math, it was 8 o'clock in the morning. I had been in labor since 2:30. So I had been in labor like a little bit over 5 hours, and I had progressed pretty well. And they thought, okay, like this baby might be coming today, like pretty soon. So they put me in the labor and delivery room, and they got me hooked up because they needed to give me a dose of antibiotic. They wanted me to have 2 rounds of antibiotics before delivering, since I did have the group B strep, which again, I wasn't happy about having to have an IV, but it wasn't worth arguing with my doctor or the staff really to fight for not having it. It basically meant that if I didn't have the group B strep antibiotic, I was gonna have to stay at the hospital for 4 days instead of 2, and I was gonna have to have additional testing done on the baby after birth to make sure baby didn't have group B. So there was just like a lot of reasons why I decided to go forward with the IV. My doctor kept saying, you should be fine to be able to still walk around, gonna be on a pole that's movable, you're not gonna be bedridden or anything like that. When I got into the labor and delivery room, I met my nurse. Her name was Lisa. She actually was from Sweden originally, and I remember her telling me what labor was like in Sweden versus America, and some interesting stories actually. And I told her, I said, listen, I want to have this baby naturally. I don't want an epidural, because she was like already ready to go find the anesthesiologist to give me my epidural. And she tried to talk me out of it. She was like, I fully support a natural birth, but you've had a C-section, like you need to have an epidural. She kept saying like, we want to do the safest thing possible. She was actually the head nurse, and so safety was like a big concern for her. Okay, fine, you don't have to get the epidural, but I at least want you to get the line and the needle put in your back, so that if you change your mind or we have to rush you to the OR, we don't want to have to put you under general anesthesia if you have to have a C-section quickly. And I kept saying, no, like you're not putting anything in my back. Don't want that. It took a lot of of negotiating with her because she kept giving me like the just in case angle. I ended up asking to just talk to the anesthesiologist. I was like, can you just send him? I want to talk to him about this, and I want to know from him like what will happen if I get to the point where I do have to have a C-section, and what will my options be. So the anesthesiologist finally came and discussed with me what the options were. I told him why I didn't want an epidural, what my birth plan was, what I was trying to achieve. And he agreed that there was a very small risk of having a C-section. He explained if I needed general anesthesia, that was also a very small percentage chance that I would be going down that road. And I was comfortable with that risk. I was willing to accept it. If I tried everything I could to have a natural birth and did end up needing a C-section and was going to be out for the actual C-section, having already been through a C-section before, I was okay with that. Anesthesiologist left, and at that point my doula was pretty close to getting there. My doula arrived. It ended up being the doula I requested, so that was really awesome. I spent the majority of the day pretty much on the birth ball. Was bearing down with every contraction. She was really helpful because she kept reminding me to breathe. She kept reminding me to focus my energy in one place. She would remind me to bring things lower and to visualize, and I did a lot of moaning, which was really awkward, I'm sure. And when I think about it now, I wish that I had like recorded my labor, because I would have liked to watch myself go through that. I think in a way that would have been like super empowering to see what my body was able to do, because going through it, you don't really remember all of it. Like you sort of block things out, I think, and your body has a way of sort of blacking out when things are super painful. So while I remember pretty much the whole day, there are bits and pieces that are very fuzzy for me, and I think those are the times where I was probably having my most intense contractions. I don't know, I would just like to have recorded it, and if I have a third child, I will definitely record the birth, because I think that it's just something that I would want to have the memory of. Like, I think it's pretty badass that I had a baby with no drugs. I spent the majority of the day on the birth ball. There were a couple times that I thought about getting into the shower, using water maybe to feel a little bit more comfortable. My hospital did not have any water tubs or anything like that in the birth rooms. If I could choose a birthing center with a whirlpool tub, I think that I would, because I would decide not to have drugs again. And usually if you're doing a birth center, you need to know that you're okay with not having an epidural. At this point, I remember I was hungry and really wanted a smoothie. That was like all I wanted, but they wouldn't let me eat. I was only allowed to have ice water and ice chips. I did not eat breakfast before I left my house, and I really wish that I had, because I was pretty hungry. I labored on the birth ball for quite a while. I remember having this like sense of urgency to push, and I kept saying to my doula, like, I feel like I'm gonna poop this baby out. Like, I know that might sound really weird, but I think I said that like 15 times that day. I kept saying, this baby's gonna fall out of me. I feel like I'm gonna poop this baby out. And like, everyone would laugh and be like, okay, I don't think it's time yet. And by the way, you're not gonna poop the baby out. But I don't know, there's just like something that's going on down there where your body is stretching in a weird way, where the sensation felt like I needed to like poop. Maybe that's TMI, but that is sort of what it felt like. Every time I was on the birthing ball and a contraction would come, I felt this need to lift my body up to like make space under me. Like, I don't know how to describe that really. I had one hand on my doula on this side of me, and then I had like another hand on my husband, and I would like almost want to like push my whole body up while I was having the deep contraction, and I was moaning and just trying to visualize my favorite place. I was on the dock at my parents' house, which is on water, and I was holding my baby on the dock, and the sun was shining and it was beautiful, and I was listening to the water. That is where my mind kept going every single time I would have a really intense contraction. And I just kept saying, like, someone needs to check me, because I'm pretty sure this baby is coming right now. And by like 1 o'clock, they finally checked me again, and they were like, yeah, you're like a 9, so we're gonna be having this baby like real soon. And I got the feeling that they were kind of rushing to get my doctor there. He barely made it there for the birth. To be honest with you, like, I don't even know if I was really a 9. I might have been like fully dilated, because I really felt like I was ready to push, and I sort of felt like they were holding me off from pushing. If this happened to me again, I would just push. I would just be like, I don't need my doctor here, I'm just gonna push. Because in a hospital setting, they try to control everything as much as they can. That's like their nature, right? Doctors and nurses want things to go like according to a plan, to keep things under control, to keep things organized. They obviously want to ensure the safety of their patients and all that jazz. jazz and make things probably easier on them. But in retrospect, I wish I had listened to my body a little bit more, because I think I missed the window of opportunity to really experience fetal ejection reflex, which, if you've not heard of that before, it's basically this like intense adrenaline rush that you get, and it gives you so much energy to just literally like pop the baby out. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and Google it, because there are definitely videos where you can see a baby just like flying out of a woman naturally. So that's kind of what I think probably would have happened had I just listened to my body, but they were kind of holding me off. By the time my doctor got there, he was like, okay, we're ready to push. And I kept telling him, I don't want to push on the bed. Like, I do not want to be on the bed. There was one other time I had gotten on the bed off the birth ball, and I was on my back, and it was so much pressure in my tailbone that it hurt so bad that I was like, no, this is not right for me. And I got up, and what I did was I was leaning on the bed. So I had like my body on the bed. It was just a lot more comfortable for me to stand up. And that makes total sense, because you're using gravity to your favor when you're standing up during birth, and you're just letting the baby kind of like naturally move down. But my doctor kept saying, we need to have you lay on your back. He said, once the baby gets under your pubic bone, at that point, if you want to stand up, if you want to be on all fours, if you want the birthing bar, like whatever you want. I did ask them, I really want a birthing bar. Can you go get me a birthing bar? And someone went and left the room to try to find the birthing bar. And as soon as I laid down on my back, number one, the intense pain came back in my tailbone. Oh my gosh, I can't even describe to you. Like, I was ready to quit. I literally looked at my doula and was like, I need the epidural. Give me the epidural. And the nurse was like, it's too late for that, obviously. And you know, I'm glad that they said that anyway, because I didn't want the epidural. What I wanted was to not be on my back, but no one would listen to me, and they kept saying, you need to be on your back to get the baby under your pubic bone. But as soon as I was on my back, I knew that that was just a ploy to get me on my back, because I stayed on my back for the rest of delivery. I kept saying, I don't want to be in this position. They were like, you need to just focus your energy. You need to just push. And Lord only knows what my husband was thinking this whole time, because here I am like screaming. I, by choice, have chosen not to get drugs. He probably thought I was a little bit nutty, but also really awesome. This was a trick to get me on my back, and probably because that's the position that they're most used to people delivering in. I just kept screaming. And this ring of fire, the ring of fire is a real thing. It feels like you're burning. Like, it literally felt like my vagina was gonna burn off. Hurt so bad. I'm sorry if that's TMI. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I'm telling you, the ring of fire is a real thing. It hurt so bad, and I just was screaming and saying, I can't do this. I just kept saying, I can't do it. And my doula kept saying, you can do it. You've gone this far. Think about why you want to do this. I think my husband could have done that for me, but also having somebody there who was a woman who hadn't given birth herself, but had watched so many other women give birth and kind of knew exactly how to get me in that positive mind space again, was so beneficial and so helpful. And my doctor, he grabbed my hand and he put my hand down, you know, down there, and said, feel your baby. And I could feel his head. I could feel his slimy, hairy head like coming out of me. When I knew that I was that close to him coming out, it gave me another surge of energy and adrenaline to figure out, how am I gonna get this kid out of me? Because I don't wanna be in this position where basically he's, you know, stretching me so much that it feels like it's burning. And I looked at my nurse, Lisa, and she looked at me and she said, listen, we're gonna do this together, and you're gonna listen to me. I know how to coach you through this, and I know how to help you make these contractions productive. And I looked at my doctor and he was like, listen to Lisa. Lisa knows what she's talking about. And I looked at her and she put her fingers kind of in, like right where the baby was, and tried to sort of like stretch things out, but also said like, this is where I want you to focus your pushing and where I want you to focus your energy right now. Make your contractions productive. So I would try to rest between contractions, and as soon as I would get one, I would just full force put my energy in that one place, and it burned so bad and it hurt, but I was just a couple more pushes away from knowing that he was out. At one point, I remember screaming at my doctor, did you just cut me? Because I'm telling you, like, the pain was so intense that I thought, oh my gosh, did he just like give me an episiotomy that I didn't want or didn't ask for? I actually think I kind of like slightly crushed my doctor's soul a little bit, because he looked at me like, I would never do that. And I was like, okay, I'm just checking because it hurts so bad. And he was like, that is just your body stretching. In retrospect, I actually think that's when I tore, because I ended up with a 2nd-degree tear, and I'm guessing that that is when that happened. I just kept focusing, and Lisa, you know, was telling me where to push the energy and where to focus, and eventually I pushed that baby out. And my doctor held the baby up, and I looked down and was like, oh my God, it's a boy, because I had no idea whether I was having a boy or a girl. And I would do that again. If I had a 3rd, I would not find out. I think knowing that when I was done pushing the baby out, I was gonna learn the gender and like really get to know this little person was so motivating to me, to be able to do it the way that God made our bodies be able to do this. And again, no shame if you choose to get an epidural. I think modern medicine is amazing. I just knew that it wasn't the right choice for me, because it was giving me too much anxiety to think that I could even do anything that might put me back in the OR. And I really wanted to experience labor. So after I announced that he was a boy, they put him on my chest and I held him. And this was such a different experience from having my first, because with my first, they took him and they checked him and they weighed him and they wiped him down and they cut the cord and quickly and all those things. And this time I knew that I wanted the golden hour and I wanted them to not bathe him. And I just was very, very articulate about what I wanted and what I didn't want. And other than giving birth on my back, my birth plan went completely according to plan. Everyone was very respectful of my wishes, and they did give me my baby and they didn't rush him away at all. You know, they let me hold him for quite a while before they weighed him and did measurements and things like that. And they wiped him off, but they did not give him a bath or anything like that. He was a slimy little dude for quite a while. He nursed right away, found his way to me and started latching, which was, again, a completely different experience than I experienced with my first, who born via C-section, kind of like a shocking way to come into the world, was super sleepy, had high bilirubin levels, ended up being under the lights, didn't really nurse or latch well at all. And then this little guy, my new guy, was just, it was such a different birth. That's my birth story. And you know, what I can say is that I bounced back so fast. Even though I had a 2nd-degree tear and that was really uncomfortable, I didn't need pain medicine or drugs after the birth. I took a little bit of Advil, you know, to help with that inflammation and the pain I was experiencing down there. For the most part, I didn't need any of the medicines like Percocet or anything like that that I had to take when I had my older son. We left the hospital after 2 days and he stayed in the room with us the whole time. I didn't let anyone take him to the nursery. I was very, very strict about the fact that I did not want to use formula unless it was like a life or death situation, and that I was determined to have my milk come in sooner and really establish a good breastfeeding relationship, because I had struggled so much with my first to get him to latch. And I could do a whole separate video on that, because both of my kids actually were born with tongue and lip ties. So that did play into, you know, both of my breastfeeding situations. But just the fact that I was able to have that golden hour with Theodore, and that, you know, he wasn't taken away from me, and that I wasn't rushed or anything like that, made all the difference in starting our breastfeeding relationship in a really good way. So the next day, my mom and my mother-in-law came, and they did bring my toddler, and he got to meet his baby brother. Overall, it was a super positive experience. Like I said, everything went according to my birth plan. I ended up getting the VBAC that I wanted, and I did it without any pain medication, and I would absolutely do it again that way. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thank you for staying positive in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video. If this video was helpful to you in any way, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you're interested in pregnancy, postpartum, and motherhood as a working mom or just a busy mom. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.